Good afternoon or good morning, depending on where you are in the world, and welcome to today's webinar. This webinar is going to take you through the headlines from our latest piece of thought leadership research about the state of digital transformation in the Asia Pacific region. Our sponsors for this research is Boomi, and we have a guest here from Boomi today who I will introduce you to very shortly. With you today is myself, Steve Nuttall from Fifth Quadrant, and I really have the pleasure of having Ajit Melarkode with me today. Ajit, welcome to the webinar.
Thank you.
So Ajit leads the APJ region. He's head of operations for Boomi. He's the vice president. He's got a lot of responsibility there for driving growth across the region, really kind of focusing on helping organizations unlock the wealth of their data that's collected and stored across their business. He's got that experience of looking at finance and strategy, business development, sales. So he's had experience working in the IT industry across many different business areas. Ajit, I know you're based in Singapore, but you do travel around the region, particularly now that, COVID restrictions also allow you to come over here to Australia. So it's good to have you out and about and meeting prospects and clients as well.
Yeah, I was delighted to, be down under last week, meeting customers and partners. As you say, I've been around a bit in a nice way. I've been in the fund management industry, in the equities research industry, covering tech. I've been in IT consulting as well as running IT companies and across US, EMEA, and the APJ region. So delighted to be here and join you in this chat.
Ajit, could you tell us about Boomi and what Boomi does as well for the benefit of the audience?
Boomi is a leader in the integration platform as a service space, the APAC space. APAC, very simply, for those who are not exposed to it, is just a Velcro that helps companies stick together devices, data, processes, teams, subsidiaries. Very simply put, it's allowing integration through pre-built connectors for thousands and thousands of endpoints, whether you want to connect one application to another, or a legacy environment to a cloud environment, or just devices into your companies. It's just a very simple, automated way to connect. And we can do that through connectors, or we can do that through APIs. Boomi is completely flexible.
Excellent. We're going to talk a lot about the benefits of connectivity and data as we look through the results of the research. And this is very much the first time that we've shared these results publicly. The report actually has not yet been published, but it will be published soon. Everybody who's registered for the webinar will get a copy of both today's slides as well as a copy of the research report when it's published. This is one of two webinars that we're running, so there will be a second one in a couple of weeks' time, and you'll get the invitation to that. So this is kind of taking the first kind of section of the report where we sit back and kind of just look at current state of digital transformation around the region, the challenges that IT leaders are having to overcome, and the role that integration platforms play in the process of digital transformation. So part one of two. This was a study of IT leaders. Most people were in pretty senior roles. This sample has been accessed via a B2B market research database. This is not based off Boomi customers. Very much kind of focused more towards the kind of the enterprise end of the market. So you had to have a minimum of 200 employees supported by the IT department to qualify for the survey. And as you can see from here, you've got nearly kind of half the sample with at least 2,000 employees. So very much kind of looking at the bigger end of town where those data challenges are more complex. There's more data to have to manage. Mix of kind of different businesses and industries, and half our sample comes from ANZ and half our sample comes from different countries within Southeast Asia. First time we've done this survey. I think as we kind of get into it, for me, when I kind of started going through the data, it's really kind of fascinating to have that first piece of analysis, but it just kind of opened up lots of other questions as well as you get into it. So I think, the first thing I'd like to do is to do a quick audience question just to keep everybody on their toes and make sure people are engaged. So this is a question. We did ask the same question to our sample who answered the survey, but I'm interested to know, when you think about the effectiveness of your organization's digital transformation, how do you think that compares to others in your industry peer group? The challenge often, I think, is knowing how you compare. Because it's difficult to kind of, really kind of know in the absence of any benchmarks, making a comparison can be quite difficult, can't it?
Yeah, I mean, it's always difficult to make a comparison, but it's always good to make a comparison because digital expectations change. I mean, I read a recent research survey that showed that customer expectations change every time they go through a really good digital experience. And so regardless of what industry they're in, they expect that same digital experience they had with one provider everywhere else. So it's actually good to compare efforts. I read an MIT survey as well, which is pretty much covering the same kind of questions that you asked, that showed that only about 28% of large enterprise class businesses were successful in digital transformation. So it's always good to compare notes.
I think this is interesting that, people are fairly, modest when they answer these questions. Not many are saying that they're significantly ahead. So I think that's encouraging. And, I think, some are also saying that they're a little behind as well. If we kind of look at that in the context of the survey results. So, there's kind of two things we're looking at here. We're looking on the left-hand side that 35% of those who responded to the survey rated the effectiveness of their digital transformation projects as being highly effective. And you've got another kind of 50% are saying somewhere in the middle, with a score of 7 and 8, and 15% are in that kind of less effective segment. And this is kind of useful because we do then use this as the basis for segmenting the sample that we have, and we can compare and contrast other questions in terms of digital effectiveness rating. However, on the right-hand side, when we ask the same question that everybody in our audience just completed, we've got 64% thinking that they're ahead of their industry peer group. I mean, 70% of people think they're above average at, driving a car. It's just mathematically not true.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as I was saying, I've seen a wider MIT, survey that talked about 28% of companies. But here's the interesting question, Steve. I mean, before I get to the interesting question, I hope everybody can hear me, clearly, because I've got both my neighbors, operating drills out of the blue. And when I was testing my mics, I was thinking, hey, here's a little example of digital transformation. Zoom has thought ahead, and they've come up with a noise canceling feature while not just providing a video conferencing application. That is true digital transformation. That's right. What I'm trying to get to, Steve, is I think the definitions of digital transformation are often different across the different customers that I talk to. At one end, some of the customers I speak to just look at it as digitalization of their processes. In my personal opinion, that's not what a digital transformation is. For me, a digital transformation is both a business as well as a cultural transformation. Yep. To allow the business to maximize the impact of converting their processes, their technology to bits and bytes. That could be fully digital in some businesses, and some businesses it could be hybrid. But it's not just a conversion to digitalization. And I have a favorite bugbear. There's a taxi application that I often use, and they often claim in the press that they've digitally transformed their business. Yeah. When I use their application, there's a facility by which you can set your favorites, your origins and your destinations. There's a little button there for home. There's a little preset button there for office. But guess what? You can't change it once you set it. So if you've moved homes or if your office address changes, it's set forever. And, in keeping with the customer services drive that, a lot of companies go through the motions on and not being genuine, every month they send me an email or an in-app, question saying, provide us with feedback. I've provided them with feedback about 10 times this year, but no change yet. And that's an example that I gave of just merely digitalizing the way that you maybe book a taxi, but it's not true digital transformation. So correct. I would postulate, Steve, that maybe some of the results that we're seeing is because maybe companies don't have a standard definition of what digital transformation is and what good looks like.
I agree. And I think kind of knowing what good looks like and what does, digital transformation effectiveness look like, I think you've already answered that question. What it looks like is how it changes, impacts and changes the business. It's not just another widget in the business, and it changes the business, but it also changes the customer experience as well. It improves the experience for the customer, and it transforms that experience rather than it just being an incremental shift.
Absolutely, for sure. I mean, there's so many different elements as well to digital transformation that need to go through, and I'm sure you'll cover that in the upcoming pages. But it's not just an IT change. It's not something that you leave to the IT team or the IT department. It's a cross-business change led by example from the very top. I've often run into leaders who go, treat IT as stuff, and put it on a little cloud on schematics, or leave it to the IT team. I mean, almost every business nowadays is, to some degree, an IT business, a technology business.
Correct.
Some of the, Ubers of the world that are the most cliched and overused examples, I guess, are at one end. But at the other end, the most unlikely companies, large utilities that are connecting devices, are running smart meters. These are the unsung heroes. In fact, it's a personal favorite of mine. I like to admire companies that outperform to shareholder expectations, where the CEOs and the leadership teams are not heroes. They're not the everyday in the press all the time heroes, but they're quietly outperforming. So for the majority of the really good companies that are performing really well on digital transformation, to the kind of definitions that you and I would expect, which is end-to-end business transformation, better outcomes for customers, better outcomes for your employees, better outcomes for shareholders, and an all-round improvement in the economic value that the company generates, the overall stakeholder value that the company generates. Those tend to be kind of quietly unsung heroes. You see a lot of examples in the press, on name chasing, shiny, bright names, and they all tend to be the same names featuring again and again and again. Yet there are many hero companies out there. I mean, I mentioned utilities. You've got Origin Energy, down under. You've got JIRA in Japan. You've got CLP in Hong Kong, doing wonderful things on this digital transformation, very quietly in the background. And that's the way digital transformation should be.
And they let that work do the talking rather than necessarily engaging an expensive PR agency to do it. So I think this slide, I think starts to talk about some of those. We're going to talk more to the outcomes, but I think, this demonstrates that those that are highly effective of digital transformation are also more mature in terms of a number of kind of core business processes. And I'd really kind of, call out, for example, documenting the major journeys core to the customer experience, and really kind of figuring out, how these journeys play out across different departmental processes. They look at it through the lens of the customer, but then they then figure out where the pain points are on those journeys, and then ultimately change departmental processes to deliver a better customer experience, because that allows them to identify gaps. And you can't do any of that really effectively unless you've connected data and applications to deliver that seamless and integrated experience. So you can see, those that are highly effective digital transformation, so that on a score of 0 to 10 out of 10, they give themselves a score of 9 out of 10 on that, versus 5.4 out of 10 on average for those who are less effective. People, you mentioned employees, Ajit, and so equipping your knowledge workers with tools to identify and automate costly, repetitive manual methods. That automation theme, again, it looks at using AI to automatically extract data, using AI to automate processing and so on. So also there's this level of automation that's happening in these businesses. Again, those who are highly effective at digital transformation, so rate their maturity on those attributes around, again, about the 9 out of 10 mark. Now, look, some of these might be overrated, but I think many of those who've responded to this probably are also some of those unsung heroes that you mentioned. I kind of read this data as kind of saying, well, this maturity in automation, this maturity in connectivity, this maturity in customer experience strategy, these seem to be kind of good indicators of digital transformation success. Would you agree with that? And why does that drive success?
Yeah, absolutely. I think this research has captured it nicely. There are nuances as well. So number one, I would say it's not using jargon for the sake of jargon. There's a lot of jargon in our industry, Steve, and people just go, hey, I'm going to take IoT, I'm going to connect it, I'm going to connect devices, I'm going to use AI and ML to make sense of the data that's coming from that. I'm going to put it all on the cloud, and somehow magically at the end of all of that, digital transformation is going to happen. So it's getting away from all that technology jargon, API usage for the sake of API usage, Sometimes you can have great APIs for every single function, but that creates too many integration endpoints when you're going through a digital transformation journey. Also, just focusing on APIs as one concept will mean that you'll have lots of good APIs, but you'd probably ignore the quality of the data at the back end and thereby expose a good API to bad data or bad processes. Also, I would look at the quadrilateral of AI and ML coming together with RPA and iPaaS and integration to create digital transformation. Because people talk about AI blandly, but AI comes at so many different levels. You've got I think it was Forrester who put it as, we've got the sensing AI, which, as in distributed devices that, gets the input. You've got, sort of comprehension to look at what does this input really mean? Then you look at analysis of that comprehension, and then the translation to say, hey, we've got all this input. I've translated it to mean X, Y, Z. What does that then mean in terms of the actions that need to be taken physically as well as in the digital space? And then finally, there's the output, of that AI. And that output can be translated into actions that are either, kind of attended, where, for example, you're filling up a form, AI pre-populates it and then asks you, is this correct? That's kind of attended AI. And then you have unattended, where if you had to do something and take an action by a specific date and you didn't take it, it just automatically goes into the workflow. So when you pair that kind of ML, sensing information, comprehending information, translating it into the right semantics to take action, and then you've got that coupled with RPA. I mean, RPA, I look at routine automation of tasks, at the tactical level. If you look at the way RPA is actually being executed on the market, and again, I'd love comments, from the participants here. A lot of RPA implementation is actually about consulting and bespoke implementations, rather than people assuming that it's, hey, you just download an RPA tool and hey presto, it's going to automatically bring automation to my company. That's not the way it works. There's a heck of a lot of professional services and consulting that goes around RPA. When I was looking at some of the financials of the RPA players, almost half or more money seems to be made on making things bespoke. So I'm trying to say in a roundabout way, this captures very succinctly on one page the kind of maturity that's required for digital transformation on various tools. But people have got to go into the nuances of AI, the nuances of ML. What does it entail in implementing RPA? Because when you put together RPA, AI, ML integration, you've got what I call hyperautomation, which is automating as many things in the business as is reasonably feasible to create a better customer experience, a better stakeholder experience, whether it's for employees or shareholders. And all of it is completely fundamental to digital transformation. You can't do digital transformation without integration and hyperautomation. You can't do hyperautomation, without AI, ML, RPA, and iPaaS, in some way. So I guess people need to go into the nuances of each of these tools rather than chasing tools and jargon in our industry just because it's fashionable and in the back of an airline seat pocket.
That's it. And we exactly. And we spoke about that on our first podcast episode that we recorded for the Essential CIO Toolkit, which I certainly recommend anybody in the audience going into listening to that as well, because I think we go into a bit of a deeper dive into some of that. I think that, just in terms of the role that data is playing, I think that, again, this is really interesting that we asked what would improve your digital transformation projects. So, even those who are highly effective, can see big improvements still. I think, you might rate yourself as highly effective, but there is still, you're on a journey. You haven't reached the end of the journey, and don't think there really ever is an end to the journey when it comes to digital transformation. I think it's more of an ongoing process of continuous improvements. And so, for those who are highly effective, where they really kind of see, the opportunities to improve it's ultimately, yes, it's having that, accurate, consistent and complete data, but also they know that you need a platform to do that as well. We can talk about, are all platforms born equal, etc. But certainly, and they're probably not. But the point is, they recognise that the value of a platform, but they also recognise that it should also be, it should be cloud. This should be cloud hosted as well. And so those would kind of be the top three. Question, Ajit, is this kind of are those like almost like the three core pillars here to to improve your digital transformation? That kind of at the start of this, you've got to start with accurate, consistent, and complete data, but that's not sufficient because you need that platform to provide connectivity, and that's not sufficient because you also need to have applications and services shifted into the cloud. So, are those kind of like you kind of that's where you start from? Is that right? Would they be the kind of the three more important areas for improvement?
This is a great snapshot, I think, of what is required to improve, an organization's digital transformation efforts. Some of these kind of feed into the others. So, for example, I'm quite surprised how low down having a single source of truth about the customer is. I guess it finally shows up in wanting to have a platform to connect your systems, applications, and data, and having a more accurate, consistent, and complete, data set, which is your first 2 points. Now, I've seen companies like, for example, Sky, which had 20 plus different tools to access the state of an end customer device. And they used an iPaaS to bring it all together to provide a better customer experience. And I can give any number of examples like that, where having a single source of truth about the customer is really important. And not just the customers, in a logistics and distribution business, it's about your partner network, having the right, EDI, platform in place to have that single source of truth about all your partners in your partner network. Again, when it comes to integration, projects and digital transformation projects, and some companies getting hung up, on just the technology aspects of it. I gave you the examples of, APIs and people getting stuck on just API-led connectivity, API-led transformation as one aspect of digital transformation. It's very easy when we chase shiny technology terms and say, hey, I'm running this containers project, or I'm running this microservices project, I'm running this API gateway project as part of digital transformation. You forget to then focus on, the data cataloging and transformation and data preparation, looking at data provenance. You forget to look at single golden source of data. It's not uncommon to have 25 or 30 plus different sources of customer data, and to have different sources of truth. So that's absolutely vital. And I'm just surprised that features as low down as it does, but I'm guessing it comes up in other ways, such as accurate and consistent and complete data sets, which is your number one finding.
Yeah, and again, to the point about, organizations rating their maturity in terms of understanding the customer journey, you can't really kind of fully understand the customer journey if you don't have a single source of truth about the customer, because you've already got to, you might have conflicting views in terms of what's really happening on that journey. And, it's so important to know who the customer is and where they're at on that journey, because if you don't have a single source of truth about me, you can't meet me on my journey. And I have a high expectation that an organization should know who I am and meet me on my journey.
You talked about, that you bring to mind another point. You talked about yourself and your journey. I think people and talent is another thing that definitely drives this, especially right now when talent is so scarce across countries. It might be the Great Resignation in the US. In Asia Pacific, it's probably not the Great Resignation. It's the great border closure and visa shutdown. I think that's what's driving the talent shortfall in many regions over here. But that's certainly one of the things to look at. What talent do you have for digital transformation? I mean, I've seen many digital transformation projects fail because people take the same people with the same talent, bring them in from some other part of the company and put them on large digital transformation projects. And you can't expect the same people with the same tools and the same culture to suddenly come up with the new end outcome. Culture is also very, very key to this. Do you have the organizational culture to drive technology adoption and digital transformation by example? So if you want, all the staff to embark on digital transformation, the top table has got to set the example to say, hey, here are the SaaS applications that I use. Here are the things that I'm doing differently. that's got to happen. There's this old saying, I think it was Peter Drucker maybe, who said, "Culture eats strategy for breakfast."
That's it. That's Peter Drucker's quote. Yeah.
I kind of have a little problem with that. I go, do you mean to say that you never considered culture as part of your strategy? For me, culture is essential to strategy. So when people come up with either their corporate strategy, their business strategy, or digital transformation strategy, people have to be core to that. People, talent, leadership, and if you sum those three together, culture has got to be core to that. How do you run, better, faster, cheaper as a DNA? I mean, IT teams today do it as part of their DevOps journeys, as part of their transformation from waterfall V to agile.
Yep.
That transformation from waterfall V to agile, running lean, running in a DevOps or even no ops mode, that culture has got to pervade the entire company to make successful digital transformation projects happen. So for me, culture is, I guess the match that lights the digital transformation fire.
Culture really kind of is the strategy. And I think, for me, culture is really just a summation of the behavior, of the prevailing behaviors, in an organization. So, you talked about agile, for example. If the behaviors aren't agile, then you can't describe your culture as agile because it's about what you do. And, if everybody follows agility, that's great, because that will become the culture. I think it's such a good point that people often overlook. Keeping on the theme of cloud hosting, I mean, I think this demonstrates that those larger organizations, 60% of those with 2,000 plus employees are saying that shifting their applications and services to the cloud would make a big improvement. I mean, I think just on that point, why do you think larger organizations see cloud-based applications as being important to achieving digital transformation success?
I guess it's how you set objectives for digital transformation. You got to go faster. Speed is everything. So in the interest of speed, I think having a platform just makes it faster rather than having to do things bespoke. Integration, for example, if you take Boomi, integration and iPaaS is the only thing we do. It's, we're market leaders in the space. We've done it for 20 plus years. I mean, with near enough 20,000 customers, 8-time Gartner Magic Quadrant leader. I mean, I don't want to plug Boomi, but what I'm trying to get to is iPaaS is the only thing that we do, and this is what we specialize in. So I guess large companies looking at platforms recognize this. They know that, hey, should I host in-house in my data center, or do I give it to an AWS or Google, whose only business is hosting? This is all they do day in and day out. Similarly, if you're looking at iPaaS as a platform, this is all we do day in and day out. We've got thousands of endpoints that we connect to. We can connect any application to any other application. We can connect from legacy to cloud, cloud to cloud, legacy to legacy. We've got SDK, we've got kits for customers to develop their own integration and connectors for in-house home-built legacy applications. We're completely agnostic. We can be on the cloud or we can be on-prem behind their firewall. And I guess this is a proxy, that's coming up there, whether it's going to one single cloud platform or going to one single RPA platform or going to one single iPaaS platform like Boomi. I guess large companies are just marking the recognition that this is all companies in the space do, and they're better off just basing it on the platform rather than doing it as one of our customers, Ampol, called it spaghetti junction, and doing it kind of bespoke.
Let's look at some of the challenges that IT leaders are facing on this digital transformation journey that they're going through. So, the main challenges, ultimately, it's quite interesting. We've kind of grouped these under kind of organizational challenges, technology challenges, and financial challenges. So for the purpose of those kind of looking at this for the first time, the darker shading identifies the number one biggest challenge. But in answering this question, respondents could tick as many of these as they wanted. So the main challenges are ultimately the multiple response. Certainly, managing all of those different priorities, managing team capacity is the number one challenge. Interestingly, I think I haven't shown the data here, but it is in the report. Those that rate their digital effectiveness highly cite that as an even bigger challenge. So for me, that's kind of saying that success breeds success, but it also comes with it more demand for your, great, talented people and the services that you're providing. I think there's also, there's also, this chart also highlights some interesting tensions, I think, within the organization. Tensions around IT leaders still getting their voice heard and having that seat at the table, having that influence over the C-suite and the board, which obviously therefore has an impact on being able to get the support that you need for new technology. And a lot of this is about, is about people from a technology background trying to talk about business issues, and about people who run different parts of the business trying to understand technology issues. And quite often it's a different language, and so you get issues that there's a lack of understanding of technology issues in the wider business, and vice versa, a lack of understanding of wider business issues in the IT department. And again, those who are less effective seem to cite that as one of their bigger problems, which suggests that the less effective are more likely to be order takers, rather than this new breed of CIO, who's a strategist, who understands business, but also has a team of people around her or him who actually understand also how to get the job done. And it is that kind of balancing act, isn't it, that on the one hand, you've really got to kind of engage and work with your senior stakeholders. On the other hand, you've got to get the work done on the ground as well. Tricky balance.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it was William Gibson who invented the term cyberspace, who said the future is here. It's just not widely distributed yet.
It's a great quote. I know. I love it. Yeah.
It's about catching up everybody to the future that is here. You can see the results over there. I mean, it's about taking senior stakeholders along on the journey. It's about, lack of understanding of wider, business issues in the IT department, and also a lack of understanding of how technology works, across the business. It's about evangelizing. I mean, again, I use the example of the DevOps culture pervading the whole company.
Yeah.
That's the task of today's CIOs, CTOs, and increasingly, I see those roles being supplanted by a chief digital officer, CDO, or a chief transformation officer who encompasses all those functions plus a business change. I guess the rise of the CDO, the chief digital officer, recognizes that it's not just IT or tech. Digital transformation is about a cultural change. It's about a business change. It's about, you can't separate technology from the business anymore. You just can't do that anymore. So it's that recognition that's showing up in that designation. I think that culture of DevOps, where one team does both dev and ops, has got to pervade the business, where the team in a business doesn't say, hey, I'm just finance and IT will do the transformation. Finance is part of the digital transformation. Procurement is, marketing is, HR is, and that's what I'm seeing. I'm seeing that I'm engaging more and more with CHROs, CPOs, chief procurement officers, COOs, CMOs, as much as I engage with the CIOs, CTOs, CFOs, and increasingly CDOs, given the state of digital transformation in companies. I also think it's a matter of breaking off the chunks in chewable bite-sized portions. I guess in any digital transformation, there's a bit of win and move. The more you win and the more you show success, the more you get support, the more you get funding, the more you get organizational support. The way we do it for our customers is to kind of first look at just connecting your business. If you're not connected, if you're a very old school business, and we've done it for a lot of names like Quanta or Amex, or even our erstwhile parent company, Dell, where we ran the largest Salesforce integration, 40,000 sellers. The second is modernize, just do what you've done once you've connected, better, faster, cheaper. And we've done that for a whole load of, different companies like Origin Energy, Cornell University, where you use the connections to just generate better outcomes and with a better technology platform. So where you previously used legacy platforms, you use SaaS platforms. Where you previously hosted, on-site, you use cloud. Where you previously did spaghetti junction, integrations, like our customer at Ampol said, you use an iPaaS platform. Once you've done that, then you get to really transform the business, whether it's workforce transformation and fundamentally changing the way your HR processes run, or marketing transformation, where you're now running hybrid, events and have seamless single sources of data. That's the next step. We've got a whole series of companies doing that, including Moderna in the vaccine space that's using Boomi iPaaS to connect the different parts of their business across cloud as well as legacy. And then you can finally innovate once you've done the connections, once you've done the modernization, once you've done the functional transformations. You can innovate across the business and come up with entirely new ways of your business to function, right across the piece. To give the example of Sky, many universities like Flinders University, UTS in Sydney, Canberra University have completely transformed the digital experience for their students in ways not imaginable previously. And that's kind of the bite-sized chunks in which you deliver that hit some of the points that you show on this page, Steve. Educating senior stakeholders, making sure IT gets the business, make sure business gets IT. It's not only the appointment of leaders, holding designations like CDO. It's not only the involvement and leading by example by the whole executive leadership team, not just the CIO, CDO, CTO. It's got to be the CHRO, the CMO, the CEO. But it's also delivering digital transformation projects in the stages that I just outlined. First connect, show a win, then modernize, show another win, then transform one function, show a win, and then completely innovate the business. And based on transformations like that, I mean, I've seen examples of CDOs and CIOs go on to become CEOs of businesses.
That's interesting.
Like Ping An Insurance in China, where Jessica Tan used to be the CDO, and she's now running the business as CEO. That
certainly wouldn't have happened 20 years ago, or wouldn't have happened, but would be less likely to happen. You're talking about DevOps as well. I mean, it was interesting to read in IT news this morning in Australia about Commonwealth Bank embarking on a huge DevOps management rollout. Apparently, they've got 7,000 seats coming in the next 10 months. They're rolling out a software development cycle ecosystem that's to 7,000 plus developers in 10 months. That's I think for me that's just kind of demonstrating how some of these larger organizations are really kind of tripling down on DevOps to achieve the outcomes that you were talking about.
Absolutely, and it's got to be at the focus has got to be on the end outcome. If we chase DevOps for the sake of it, or I often give the example of APIs for the sake of it.
Yeah.
And I saw that someone's actually created a meme on an example that I often like to provide without attributing it to me. I like to give the example of, APIs are like the menu card, in a restaurant. You can't obsess on the menu card because the menu card translates between the back end, which is the kitchen, and the front end, that's the customer.
Yep.
You've got to focus on the front end and the customer. You've got to obsess on the customer, and you've got to obsess at the back end and delivering really great food and really great wine. Obsessing on the menu card for me is the obsessing on API management or DevOps or cloud and just getting stuck on the technology for the sake of it. So as long as you're focused on business outcomes, and as long as digital transformation is not just an IT project, and you're not focusing on the menu card, but the customers in the kitchen, I think all will be fine.
It's a great analogy. Let's turn to integration platforms.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many different, definitions of integration platforms as well that survey runs. I mean, you've got folks like us who were born on the cloud and invented the industry, and we've got API-led connectivity as well as integration-led connectivity on our platform. It's preceded by data cataloging and single source of data, as well as EDI for those in the logistics industry. And then there are those who just do API or just do connectors or do the old school ESB. It's the ancient dinosaur ways of working.
To this slide here that we're looking at, which is looking at, across the sample, where we've got, 61% saying they're using an integration platform, but this doesn't really kind of ask the question exactly what does that integration platform look like. I mean, it doesn't differentiate between whether it's a Ferrari or a Toyota Corolla. It doesn't tell you the quality of the platform, it doesn't tell you the functionality of the platform, etc. So, it's encouraging that, those that are highly effective at using a platform, but this doesn't really kind of explore exactly whose platform. Maybe the next iteration of this research will kind of get beneath the bonnet a little bit more. But I think your point, Ajit, was that, all platforms are not made equal.
Yeah, there's a few interesting flavors here. I mean, one is the definition. Many people, when I go in, they go, oh yeah, we use an integration platform. And when I actually probe what that is, that's just an old school ESB, or it's just API-led connectivity and it's not connector-led. Or people question, hey, I'm using APIs because they're reusable, without knowing that connectors, especially ones that, that of the sort that Boomi uses, is based on GCD, graphical component-based design. which is as reusable as APIs and doesn't lead to the endpoint mess that APIs lead to. I mean, I had a customer that came off, a pure API-led integration platform over to us, where we've got connectors, pre-built connectors as well as APIs. I think they had over 100 endpoints for just one single business process, which is kind of insane. It's just the unnecessary proliferation of APIs.
Yeah.
Another question that I often get asked, around integration platforms and the use of integration platforms in digital transformation is, hey, what about microservices? How do integration platforms and microservices, pair together? How does it work with Dockers and containers? Again, while starting off by marking, let's not get obsessed with a menu card and technology for the sake of technology and not the technology, but the end outcomes. If you look at containers and microservices and what they actually need to achieve for the business, you're looking at sort of componentization of services and decoupling processes from apps. You're looking at being organized around business capabilities, at the application level. You're looking at focus on specific products and functions rather than projects when you do microservices. You're looking at design for failure. You're looking for decentralized governance of your architecture. And you're looking at infrastructure, automation. All of this today can be done on an iPaaS platform. So you don't even need to obsess over, hey, am I using containers or not? Am I using microservices or not? At the same time, we can deploy, Boomi to a Docker container. So we can deploy microservices, but you really don't have to, the way the Boomi iPaaS platform is architected. So I see a lot of questions, Steve, on what aspects of an iPaaS platform do I use?
Yeah.
What aspect of containerization and APIs and Dockers and microservices do I use? My short answer to that, just like this page, is it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what the definition of the iPaaS platform is.
Yeah.
Let's not get obsessed on the technology.
Yeah.
Boomi iPaaS makes it really easy in that we provide for all. Whether you want to be on cloud or on-prem, we provide for that. If you want microservices, we provide for that. But as I said, our architecture philosophy already provides for the principles behind microservices. If you want API-led iPaaS, we provide that. If you want container-led, if you want connector-led iPaaS, we provide that too. So I would say the need for an iPaaS platform is absolutely critical because there is no digital transformation without integration. There is no hyper-automation without integration in iPaaS. But within iPaaS, I wouldn't get overly hung up on individual capabilities as long as you pick a platform. And picking a platform like Boomi, as I explained, ticks multiple boxes anyway.
That's it. Well, I think let's look at because I think it all comes back to the business outcomes. And so when we look at the business outcomes that data integration projects have achieved for organizations, there's a real difference between those that are planning to use a platform versus those that are currently using a platform. So, we can clearly see that, because you've got improved data quality, you get better insights. With better insights, that enables you to provide that more integrated customer experience. At the same time, the experience is better because you're collaborating and removing friction and making it easy to do business with customers. But it's also driving innovation, new revenue streams, and ultimately time to value as well. So across the board, I think we can see here that you've got different benefits. I mean, there was an audience question that I saw just now, which said, how do you get the C-suite on board? What language do you use, Ajit, to persuade people who are not technology buyers? How do you get the C-suite on board in the organizations that you deal with?
Yeah, I mean, those are quite interesting insights. I think Larry Page, of Google said that I'd rather make mistakes in moving fast than not make any mistakes and move really slowly. Speed is absolutely vital in today's world. I mean, speed will trump everything else. And speed of innovation especially will trump anything else. And you've got it there. You said allowed for faster innovation. That kind of just captures what I've seen with my customers and with my partner network. Creating new revenue streams. I mean, you asked the question on what gets projects backed. Revenue is respect. Revenue is respect, and the more revenue you make, the more respect that you get. And that's why I laid out the examples earlier of the way I've seen successful digital transformations play is do it in those stages, connect, modernize, transform, innovate. Each stage will provide a sort of win that you can showcase back to your board. Every time you get a win, you get more credibility, and that means more budgets and more backing for whatever you do. Number two, you've got to create that culture. I mean, whatever we're doing as an IT team for companies where digital transformation is restricted to just IT, try to communicate that culture of IT, of DevOps, of Agile through the whole organization. Create sprints that are, business-wide. Make sure that the communication is, business-wide rather than just IT. Hire chief digital officers. Put yourselves on an iPaaS platform, for integration, because there's no digital transformation without iPaaS. And when you have iPaaS that then facilitates RPA, that then facilitates AI and facilitates ML, that quadrilateral of AI, ML, RPA and iPaaS leads to hyperautomation and then leads to digital transformation. Each one of those is a staged win that, number one, gives you the faster innovation, gives you that increased speed to market that I see here, leads to creating new revenue streams, and more revenue means more respect, and more respect means more backing, for the digital transformation efforts that the people on today's call are all trying to achieve. I've looked at improved data quality as well for improved insights. This is one of those self-reinforcing facts of digital transformation. People often look at speed, but they don't look at accuracy. But the more digital you become, the more accurate your data becomes, almost by definition.
Correct.
So it's a self-reinforcing loop that the faster you do your digital transformation using the last three columns that you've got on your the bars that you have in your chart, the better the first bar chart becomes, which then drives the second one. So everything over here on this page, Steve, is intricately interlinked. But I guess it's those last three elements that particularly stand out for many of my customers. That's what's driven the visibility of digital transformation and the digital teams.
And I think I'd also maybe add to that, don't overlook the boring bits. 73% of those who are using a platform talked about improved operational efficiency. It might sound a bit boring, but I'm telling you, a lot of organizations would benefit hugely from improved operational efficiency.
Yeah, I would. I mean, it says improve collaboration and remove friction. I mean, that's brilliant. I would also encourage collaboration and remove friction, across the industry. I mean, I would encourage note sharing, or if it's a highly competitive industry, just get together with peers in other industries and take notes to ensure, on your first page where you showed 64% of people feeling that they were slightly ahead or well ahead, it doesn't lead to that kind of overconfidence. I mean, I keep mentioning Ampol again and again. I mean, that customer's got a great quote. I think we've created something like 70% faster integration at 30% of the previous cost. So when I go to some of the customers who say, hey, we're doing great on our digital transformation, and I kind of quote that, here's just one example, but I can think of multiple examples where using an iPaaS and using Boomi iPaaS, we achieved 70% faster integrations at 30% of the previous cost. Imagine the traction you get with a CFO or a CEO that you go back and say, you were trying to integrate a newly merged entity. I did it 70% faster at 30% of the cost. Or, a CFO says, I'm trying to bring up one single source of the customer because I'm going to generate new contracts. I'm going to generate a new way of working. I'm going to convert a pay annually business to a pay by the hour business, maybe. And you tell the CFO, hey, I achieved that for you 70% faster at 30% of the previous cost. I mean, that's very powerful.
I think that this has come on to that other powerful benefit. I think this looks at, if you could improve your integration and connectivity, what benefits, would you enjoy? So again, it's kind of really interesting that those who are using an integration platform, in second place there is increased productivity alongside improved productivity, again, demonstrating it's a business outcome. I guess, the question is just kind of tease out that profitability gain. How do you get that gain of profitability? How does that come about through improved integration and connectivity?
It's very simple. You're removing the frictions in the system. I mean, if you think about how integration projects are run, digital transformation projects are done, first of all, you're converting physical processes as part of digital transformation and removing physical processes, physical artifacts like paper out of the equation. You're achieving customer outcomes a lot faster. What used to be previously a physical process limited by office hours can be now done at any point in time. You have better access to your partner network. You have better access across your ecosystem digitally.
Yeah.
So you have access to a wider network, faster, 24/7, and with none of the physical artifacts and the physical costs involved. And this is all part of the digital transformation. And you're doing all of that with greater accuracy as well on top of speed. And there is no digital transformation without integration. How do you move from a legacy application to a cloud application without connecting that legacy application to the cloud application first? Yeah. In fact, one of our customers said to me, hey, I've got about 200 applications to move from legacy to the cloud. I've only got enough skills to move 20 a year. That's going to take me 10 years to make my digital transformation happen and move to the cloud and move to an all SaaS footprint rather than this homegrown, home-coded, held together with sticky tape, legacy application. So that's what drives the profitability, removing the frictions, removing, the inability to connect legacy and cloud, removing any doubts on accuracy, being able to seamlessly connect whatever you want on one platform. So if you want to connect IoT devices, you can use an iPaaS platform. If you want to connect one of your legacy applications to another legacy application, you can use iPaaS. If you want to connect an application to another application on-prem, you can use iPaaS. If you want to connect an on-prem app to a cloud app, you can use iPaaS. If you want to connect a cloud app to a cloud app, again, you can use iPaaS. Previously, you would deploy a lot of resources in doing this coding. You don't have to do that. It's low code. It's all based on the cloud, all behind your firewall. You don't have to have a PhD to make this happen. In today's talent constrained world, that is particularly important. And controversially, partners are seeing, the big benefit of it. I say controversially because, many of the partners have come along, the systems integrators have come along on a maturity journey, just as they did on cloud, 10 years ago, where initially a lot of the SI network felt that cloud was cannibalizing their revenues. And then they realized actually it was helping the customers. And the moment you help customers, you grow with the customers. Similarly, there are lots of complex, difficult to integrate, difficult to implement iPaaS platforms out there. Boomi is not one of them. We're the simplest to learn, simplest to implement, simplest to maintain. We silently do 10 to 11 upgrades in the background. We don't have to do a replatforming almost like some of the other iPaaS platforms. Makes it really easy, and that further adds to the profitability.
To the value. I think that's the last slide we're going to show today. There's a couple of minutes left. If anybody from the audience have any burning questions that you'd like to ask Ajit, or any questions that you've got about the research.
I see one on his 100% digital.
There we go.
I see two, I see three. Okay. I don't know whether I can answer all of them.
Let's go for it.
So what are the critical success factors to have the platform integration successful? Is there such a thing as 100% digital? Let me take the first one first. I think the critical success factors to have platform integration, successful, I guess it's a couple of things. One is know what your end outcomes of integration are, very, very clearly. Set your objectives to say, hey, am I integrating just a platform? Am I integrating just a couple of applications? Or is this part of a wider digital transformation project? So it's absolutely key to have the objectives for the integration, why you're putting in the integration platform very, very clear. Secondly, know the objectives for the specific project. So if, for example, if you're saying, hey, I'm going from legacy to cloud, I want it to be successful, have time objectives, have dollar objectives, have end customer outcome objectives. The third is to have the right talent in place on your side, as well as our side or the partner side. The good news is that Boomi as a platform is extremely easy to pick up and implement. That is absolutely key. 4 is keep continuously reviewing where you're at. So do it in bite-sized chunks and continuously keep reviewing where you're at. So it's not rocket science. I mean, that's the whole point in having an iPaaS platform. It's easy to implement, it's easy to maintain, but you've got to have very clear objectives for why you're implementing it and keep reviewing it. I mean, this is the whole thing. Against running a massive multi-month project on integration with thousands of lines of code, the whole point in an integration platform, it's dead easy to implement. So the real onus is on making sure you've got the right talent on your side and to set the right objectives.
Any other questions you want to pick out from there?
I guess the other question was, is 100% digital desirable? I mean, I don't know about that one. Given the COVID experience where we all suffered and seeing each other like this above the shoulder on Zoom and not being able to see other humans, I don't think 100% digital, I think 100% digital becomes dystopia very quickly. But again, if I'm talking from a Boomi perspective, we're completely hybrid, whether it's on-prem, off-prem, we don't care either way.
I'm looking forward to hosting my first webinar in the metaverse. It's going to happen one day. Well, look, thanks so much, Ajit. It's been a pleasure having you on today, and I'm really looking forward to the next webinar in 2 weeks' time. Second webinar is going to be all about automation, tools, low code, and future technology investment. So we would love to see you again on the 27th of April for that second webinar. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much for having me, Steve. One of our key core values at Boomi is create awesome things. So let's go create some awesome things on all your digital transformation.